In 1868, Jo March is a teacher in New York City. She goes to an editor, Mr. Dashwood, who agrees to publish a story she has written. Her sister Amy, in Paris with their Aunt March, sees their childhood friend Laurie and invites him to a party. There, she becomes angry at his drunken behavior, and he mocks her for spending time with wealthy businessman Fred Vaughn. In New York, Jo is hurt when Friedrich Barr, a professor infatuated with her, constructively criticizes her writing, and she ends their friendship. After receiving a letter that her younger sister Beth's illness has worsened, Jo returns home. 7 years earlier, Jo and her 3 sisters live in Concord, Massachusetts. At a party with her older sister Meg, Jo befriends Laurie, the grandson of their neighbor, Mr. Lawrence. On Christmas morning, the girl's mother, Marmee, persuades her daughters to give their breakfast to their poor neighbor, Mrs. Hummel, and her starving children. Returning home, the girls find their table full of food from Mr. Lawrence, and a letter from their father fighting in the American Civil War. Jo visits their Aunt March, who invites her to Europe. Laurie notices Amy standing outside, having been hit by her teacher for misbehaving in class, and invites her in before her family comes to take her home. When Meg, Jo, Laurie, and John, Laurie's tutor and Meg's eventual husband, go to the theater, a jealous Amy burns Jo's writings, deeply upsetting Jo. The next morning Amy, wanting to make up with Jo, chases her onto a lake where Jo and Laurie are skating. They save Amy when she falls through the ice. Mr. Lawrence invites Beth to play the piano in his house, as she reminds him of his late daughter. In the present, Laurie visits Amy to apologize for his behavior. He urges her not to marry Fred, but to marry him instead. Though in love with Laurie, Amy refuses, upset at always being second to Jo. She later turns down Fred's proposal, only to learn Laurie has left for London. After the wedding, Laurie admits his feelings for Jo, but she insists she does not feel the same. In the present, Marmee reveals that a devastated Amy is returning from Europe with a sick Aunt March. Jo wonders if she was too quick to turn Laurie down and writes a letter for him. Preparing to leave, Amy tells Laurie she turned down Fred's proposal. They kiss and later marry on the journey home. Laurie and Jo agree just to be friends, and Jo throws away the letter she wrote him. She begins writing a novel based on the lives of her and her sisters, and sends the first chapters to Mr. Dashwood, who is unimpressed. Barr turns up at the March house on his way to California. In New York, Mr. Dashwood's daughters demand to know how Jo's book ends. He agrees to publish the book, but finds it unacceptable that the main character is unmarried. Jo amends her ending so that the main character, herself, chases after Barr and stops him from going to California. She negotiates copyright and royalties with Mr. Dashwood. Later, Jo has inherited Aunt March's house and opened it as a school, where Meg, Amy, and Barr all teach. Jo observes the printing of her book, titled Little Women.